stay there, especially for all you Regent Business School students getting ready to jump into entrepreneurship.
Hey.
We've got something pretty important lined up for you today. We're going to explore making smart financial moves for those future businesses you're dreaming up.
Yeah, think of this as like laying some groundwork. It's a bit of a preview for a really key part of your upcoming Entrepreneurs Bootcamp.
Exactly. We're talking about Session 7, getting a real handle on your business finances.
Finance can sound a bit heavy, maybe intimidating,
Yeah, it sometimes gets that reputation.
but honestly, think of it more like your essential toolkit. It's what helps keep those amazing business ideas you have not just surviving, but actually, thriving.
Exactly. It's fundamental. If you want to build something that lasts, you've got to get comfortable with the financial side.
So our aim today, let's try and make these key money concepts feel a bit clearer, maybe even, dare I say, a little less scary.
Definitely achievable.
Yeah.
It's not just about tracking numbers after the fact. It's really about having a clear roadmap, understanding where you're headed financially.
Okay, so what are we covering?
Well, we'll dig into some really practical stuff like how do you actually estimate your future income? How do you get a real grip on your costs? And that big one, figuring out the point where your business actually starts making money, not just covering costs.
It's a break-even point.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And also planning for funding, getting the money you need. And finally, something often overlooked, the assumptions underpinning everything.
Our mission today really is just to unpack the basics, stuff like tracking resources, understanding costs and revenue.
And figuring out that crucial number, the minimum sales you actually need to, survive and start thriving.
Spot on. It all feeds directly into what you'll cover in the boot camp, so definitely useful stuff.
Okay, so let's get into it. The foundation really is a solid financial plan. And this isn't just like paperwork.
No, not at all. It's genuinely your business's financial map, your guide.
And the bootcamp material highlights some really vital components of this plan.
Okay, so let's jump into the first bit, the exciting part maybe. Bringing money in. Revenue projection.
Yeah, revenue projections.
Yeah.
So what are they? Essentially, they're your best estimates of the income you expect your business to generate over, say, the next year or 3 years.
It sounds like a really vital first check, doesn't it, to see if the whole idea is even viable.
It absolutely is. But the key thing here is that a good projection isn't just wishful thinking. It can't be.
Right. Not just plucking numbers from the air.
Exactly. It needs to be built on solid ground. You have to think carefully about your sales forecasts. How much can you realistically sell?
Okay.
Then there's your pricing strategy. What will customers actually pay for your product or service? And underlying all that is market demand. Is there a real need or desire for what you're offering? It's worth maybe even thinking about different scenarios here.
Like best case, worst case.
Yeah, exactly. Best case, worst case, and maybe most likely scenario. It helps you understand the possibilities and what really drives those numbers.
That makes a lot of sense. Grounding your optimism with, well, actual research and thought. Okay, let's flip the coin. We've talked about money coming in. What about money going out? The expense budget?
Yes, the expense budget. Basically, this is your plan outlining all the costs you expect to incur running the business.
So everything from, I don't know, rent to paper clips.
Pretty much. And it's really useful to break these costs down into categories. Helps you see things clearly.
Oh, so?
Well, we usually talk about fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs are the ones that, generally speaking, stay the same each month, regardless of how much you sell.
Like rent for your office, maybe. Or salaries if they're fixed.
Exactly. Rent, fixed salaries, maybe insurance premiums, those kinds of things. Then you have variable costs.
And those change.
Right. They go up or down depending on your activity levels, your sales volume, or how much you produce. Think about the raw materials for your product. If you sell more, you need more materials, so that cost goes up.
Got it. So knowing which is which seems pretty important.
It's crucial because it helps you understand your cost structure, see where the money's really going, and maybe spot areas where you could be more efficient or cut back if needed. And it leads us straight into our next big topic.
Which is figuring out when you actually start making money.
You got it. The break-even analysis. Finding that sweet spot.
Okay, break even. This sounds really fundamental for any entrepreneur.
Oh, it is. The break-even point is basically the level of sales where your total income exactly matches your total costs.
So at this point where you're not losing money anymore.
Correct. But you haven't made a profit yet either. You're just breaking even.
Why is knowing this number so critical?
Well, it tells you the absolute minimum you need to sell just to survive, just to cover everything. It helps you set realistic sales targets. Once you sell more than your break-even amount, That's when the profit starts rolling in.
Okay, let's try and make this concrete. Maybe use an example. Say we're selling cool Regent Business School branded notebooks.
Okay, notebooks. I like it.
Let's say we sell them for 100 Rand each. And maybe the cost to produce each notebook, the paper, the printing, the cover, is 60 Rand. And let's imagine our fixed costs each month, maybe a small shared workspace fee, internet total 20,000 Rands. So the big question, how many of these notebooks do we need to sell every month just to cover that 20,000 Rand plus the cost of the notebooks themselves?
All right, let's figure it out. There's a formula, but it's pretty logical. First, you need to know how much you make on each notebook after its direct cost. That's your selling price minus your cost price.
So 100 Rand minus 60 Rand. That's 40 Rand profit per notebook.
Well, contribution margin, technically.
Exactly. 40 Rand contribution per notebook towards covering fixed costs and then profit. Now you take your total fixed costs
The 20,000 Rand.
and you divide that by the contribution you make per unit, the 40 Rand.
Okay, so 20,000 divided by 40. That's 500, right?
Spot on. 500 notebooks. That's your break-even point in units. You need to sell 500 notebooks each month just to cover all your costs.
Wow, okay. And what about in terms of sales value in Rand?
Simple enough. Just multiply the number of units, 500 notebooks, by the selling price per notebook.
So 500 times 100 Rand, that's 50,000 Rand.
Correct. Your break-even turnover is 50,000 Rand per month. You need to bring in that much revenue just to keep the lights on, essentially. Selling notebook number 501 is where the actual profit begins.
That really clarifies things. Knowing that 500 notebook mark or that 50,000 Rand target gives you something concrete to aim for. It's not just a vague goal anymore.
Absolutely. It's a vital benchmark. Okay, but what about getting started? Before you've sold any notebooks, you need money to produce them, to pay that first month's workspace fee. Where does that initial cash come from?
Good question. That brings us to funding requirements and strategy.
Right, figuring out how much you need and where you'll get it.
Exactly. You need to carefully map out how much capital you actually need to launch the business, or maybe later to grow it. And just knowing the amount isn't enough.
You need a plan.
You definitely need a plan, a strategy for how you're going to secure that funding. Are you looking for a loan, which is debt, or are you seeking investors who will take a share of the business, which is equity?
Different paths with different implications.
Very different. And if you're approaching banks or investors, you can't just hold out your hand and say, I need 50,000 Rand.
No, I guess not.
You need to be crystal clear about what you'll use that money for. Buying inventory, marketing, paying initial salaries.
And they'll want to know what's in it for them, presumably.
Absolutely, especially investors. What's the potential return on their investment? You need to build a compelling case, show them you've done your homework, and that there's a real opportunity.
Makes sense. It's about building confidence and trust. Now, all these numbers we're projecting, sales, costs, funding needs, they aren't just facts yet, are they? They're based on, well, guesses about the future.
Educated guesses, hopefully. But yes, they're based on what we call financial assumptions.
Okay, so what are those exactly?
Financial assumptions are basically the underlying beliefs or conditions upon which you're building all your financial projections.
Can you give an example, maybe relating back to our notebooks?
Sure. An assumption might be the percentage of Regent students who would actually buy a branded notebook, or the assumption about what price point the market will bear. Will they really pay 100 Rand?
Okay.
Or maybe assumptions about the cost of paper staying stable or the overall economic climate affecting student spending. These are all assumptions.
I guess it's pretty important to know what your assumptions are.
Critically important. You need to state them clearly. Firstly, so others, like investors, understand the basis of your plan, but also for yourself, you need to constantly ask, how realistic is this assumption?
Because if a core assumption is wrong,
then your whole financial forecast could be unreliable, right? If you assume 50% of students will buy, but the reality is closer to 5%, your break-even point and profit projections are suddenly way off.
right, that could be disastrous. So you need to identify them and ideally validate them somehow.
Exactly. Test your assumptions wherever possible. Do some market research, talk to potential customers, look at competitor pricing.
Okay, so we've covered quite a bit. Revenue, expenses, break-even, funding, assumptions. How does this all fit together?
Well, all these pieces, your revenue projections, your expense budget, the break-even analysis, your funding plan, and clearly stated assumptions, they all come together to form your overall financial plan.
The roadmap you mentioned earlier.
This is such useful, practical stuff, especially as you all gear up for Session 7 of the boot camp.
Definitely.
Understanding these financial basics, especially that break-even point, it's just so fundamental for making informed decisions and setting goals that are actually achievable.
Couldn't agree more. It takes the guesswork out of it, gives you a concrete number to aim for initially.
Oh, so maybe a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah, perhaps something to chew on. As you consider the different business ideas you're exploring, what would be your key fixed costs? The unavoidable ones.
And what about your variable costs? The ones tied directly to making or selling your product or service.
Try thinking about those specific costs for your idea, because identifying those is the first step to calculating your very own break-even point.
A really practical exercise to start thinking about right now. Food for thought before session 7.